The Cold War, a geopolitical and ideological struggle that spanned nearly half a century, was not just a battle between two superpowers, but a clash of civilizations, ideologies, and worldviews. This silent conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union, two of the most powerful nations in history, shaped global politics, economics, and military strategies from the end of World War I in 1945 until the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991. The Cold War was fought not with the conventional weapons of war, but with propaganda, espionage, economic warfare, and proxy conflicts. It divided the world into two blocks: the capitalist bloc, led by the United States, and the communist bloc, led by the Soviet Union. These two superpowers, while never directly engaging in battle, supported opposing factions in regional conflicts, influencing nations and shaping the course of history for generations. Origins of the Cold War. The roots of the Cold War lie in the aftermath of World War I. The war had left much of Europe in ruins and shifted the balance of power across the globe. The United States and the Soviet Union emerged from the war as the two most powerful nations, but their political and ideological differences were stark. The U.S. advocated for democratic capitalism, a system based on private enterprise, individual rights, and democratic governance. In contrast, the Soviet Union, led by Joseph Stalin, espoused Marxist-Leninist communism, a system that called for the abolition of private property, a centralized economy, and a one-party state. In 1945, as Nazi Germany surrendered, the Allies, primarily the U.S., the UK, and the Soviet Union, met at the Yalta Conference to discuss the post-war world. Though they had worked together to defeat Hitler, the differences between their visions of the future were already apparent. Stalin sought to expand Soviet influence over Eastern Europe, and while the U.S. and the UK hoped for a free and democratic post-war Europe, the Soviets were intent on establishing satellite states in their own image. By 1947, the ideological division between the U.S. and the USSR became more pronounced. The U.S. adopted the Truman Doctrine, which pledged to contain the spread of communism worldwide. This policy, in essence, set the stage for the ideological divide that would define the Cold War. The Soviet Union, on the other hand, solidified its control over Eastern Europe, creating a buffer zone of communist regimes. The stage was now set for a long and tense standoff. The Iron Curtain and the beginning of division. Winston Churchill, in a famous speech at Westminster College in 1946, declared that an Iron Curtain had descended across Europe, dividing the continent into two opposing spheres of influence: the Free West and the Communist East. This image of an impenetrable wall that separated the democratic nations of Western Europe from the authoritarian states of Eastern Europe became the enduring symbol of the Cold War. The Berlin blockade of 1948-1949 was one of the first direct confrontations between the two superpowers. In an effort to curb the influence of the West in the divided German city, Stalin ordered the blockade of West Berlin, hoping to force the Allies out. In response, the United States and its allies launched the Berlin Airlift, sending food, fuel, and other supplies to West Berliners for almost a year. The blockade was eventually lifted, but the incident solidified the divide between East and West and confirmed the deepening hostilities between the superpowers. The rise of proxy wars. While the Cold War itself remained largely a war of ideologies, it was marked by a series of proxy wars where both the United States and the Soviet Union backed opposing sides in local conflicts. These were often fought in places far from Europe, but their outcomes had a significant impact on global geopolitics. One of the most notable proxy conflicts was the Korean War, 1951–53. After World War I, Korea was divided along the 38th parallel, with the Soviet Union backing the Communist North and the United States supporting the Democratic South. In 1950, North Korean forces, led by Kim Il-sung, launched an invasion of the South, hoping to unify the peninsula under communist rule. The U.S. intervened on behalf of South Korea, and a brutal 3-year war ensued. The conflict ended in a stalemate, with the Korean peninsula remaining divided and the Demilitarized Zone, DMZ, established along the 38th parallel. The Korean War solidified the deep ideological divide in Asia and set the stage for further conflicts throughout the Cold War. Another key battleground was Vietnam. The Communist North, led by Ho Chi Minh, fought against the South, which was supported by the U.S. The U.S. became deeply involved in Vietnam in the 1960s, hoping to stop the spread of communism in Southeast Asia as part of the broader domino theory that if one country fell to communism, others would follow. The Vietnam War, 1955–1975, became a quagmire for the U.S., resulting in massive casualties and widespread public opposition. Ultimately, the war ended with the fall of Saigon in 1975 and the unification of Vietnam under communist rule. Other proxy wars took place in regions like Afghanistan, Angola, Cuba, and Latin America, with both superpowers using these conflicts to extend their influence. The Cold War turned much of the developing world into a chessboard, where superpower rivalry led to the destabilization of countries and regions. The space race and technological competition. Cold War was not only a contest of military might, but also of technological and scientific achievements. The space race became one of the most visible manifestations of Cold War competition. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the first artificial satellite, which sent shockwaves through the United States and the world. The success of Sputnik signaled Soviet technological prowess and challenged U.S. dominance in science and innovation. The U.S. responded by accelerating its own space program, culminating in the Apollo missions, which led to the first human landing on the moon in 1969. The space race was emblematic of the broader technological rivalry that marked the Cold War. Both superpowers sought to demonstrate their technological and scientific superiority, and this race not only advanced space exploration, but also led to innovations in telecommunications, computing, and military technology. The competition extended beyond space exploration, with both sides developing increasingly advanced nuclear weapons, leading to an arms race that included the development of intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, and nuclear submarines. The tense and the thawing of relations. As the Cold War progressed into the 1970s, there were moments of detense or a relaxation of tensions between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. Two countries signed several key arms control agreements, including the Strategic Arms Limitation Talks, SALT, which sought to limit the number of nuclear weapons each side could possess. The U.S. and the Soviet Union also cooperated in scientific endeavors, such as the Apollo-Soyuz mission in 1972, where astronauts from both countries docked their spacecraft in space as a symbol of cooperation. However, these moments of thawing were often short-lived. The invasion of Afghanistan by the Soviet Union in 1979 led to a renewed escalation of tensions, and the boycotted the 1980 Moscow Olympics in protest of Soviet actions. Meanwhile, in the U.S., the election of Ronald Reagan in 1980 marked a return to a more hardline stance against the Soviet Union, which Reagan famously referred to as the evil empire. The end of the Cold War. The Cold War finally began to wind down in the 1980s under the leadership of Mikhail Gorbachev, the last leader of the Soviet Union. Gorbachev introduced a series of reforms aimed at revitalizing the Soviet system, including glasnost, openness, and perestroika, restructuring. These reforms sought to bring greater transparency and economic restructuring to the Soviet Union, but also led to greater political freedom and calls for independence from Soviet satellite states in Eastern Europe. In 1989, the Berlin Wall, the physical manifestation of the division of Europe, fell. The peaceful revolution in East Germany and the subsequent collapse of communist regimes in Central and Eastern Europe signaled the end of Soviet dominance in the region. By 1991, the Soviet Union itself dissolved, and the Cold War was officially over. Legacy of the Cold War. The Cold War left a lasting legacy on the world. It shaped the global political order, influencing the formation of alliances like NATO and the Warsaw Pact, and left behind a world that was deeply divided along ideological lines. The Cold War also had a profound impact on the development of nuclear weapons and the concept of mutually assured destruction, MAD, which kept the superpowers from directly engaging in battle, even as they built vast nuclear arsenals. The end of the Cold War marked the unipolar moment of American dominance in world affairs. However, the legacy of the Cold War can still be felt today in ongoing conflicts. The persistence of nuclear weapons and the ideological divide that continues to shape global politics. The Cold War may have ended, but the clash of ideologies it embodied, capitalism versus communism, democracy versus authoritarianism, remains a part of the global conversation. In the end, the Cold War was not just a confrontation between two superpowers, but a clash of ideologies that redefined the modern world. The ideals and conflicts of that era continue to reverberate in the political and cultural landscapes of the 21st century.